This is Alex with Erfan. Erfan, do you want to say hi?
Hey guys, it's me.
Alrighty. Today we're going to go to chapter 1, section 3. We're going to talk about how to go from manual calculations to class methods. Once again, everything is being covered from the book AP Computer Science Done Right, and it's available on Amazon in case you'd like to purchase it. You can either purchase the ebook or the physical hard copy to kind of go through the concepts and methods together. Alrighty. Before we get started, Erfan, do you want to talk about what we learned in last class?
Yes, so in the last class we learned about the classes
Mm-hmm.
and the constructors and how to make a new class or a new constructor.
Mm-hmm.
And also we've learned that we should write a purpose statement for every code at the start of the code.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. These are all excellent things that we learned. Um, we learned about purpose statements and comments in general. And one thing that we learned in the homework from last class, if you remember, a new data type. Do you remember?
Yes, and Boolean.
Yes, exactly, Booleans. So these are all the things that we learned from last class. So if you have forgotten any of them or if you need help creating classes or constructors, please go ahead and rewatch the last video. All right, in this class, in chapter 1.3, we're going to learn about manual calculations to class methods. So let's go back to our previous examples or previous thoughts. So remember how we represented a person, um, and if they had information like their weight and height, we represented them in our data world. So now let's say a person has a weight, and I believe we decided to have their weight in kilograms. Is that right?
Exactly, yes.
Perfect. So let's say, Irfan, you have all your information in a data system in a hospital in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say you're in France and all your information is in kilograms. But then you move to United States. First of all, congratulations. Welcome to United States. Um, but the doctors here want to know your weight in pounds. Um, the way that you would uh, represent your weight from kilograms to pounds is you would need to multiply your weight by something like 2.20462. So you would multiply your weight by this, and then whatever you get is your weight in pounds. Um, so this is like quite a lot of calculations for someone to just do in their head, like immediately. So we want to
Mm-hmm.
make this instead of a manual uh, check, we want to make this be an automatic check. So if you want to have an automatic thing in our class person, remember how we had the fields? Do you remember the fields?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and then we had the constructor, took a bunch of parameters, constructed a person. We can have methods. Methods. Methods are essentially what we mean when we want to have an automation of some sort. If we want to do some calculations, and the way that we would write these methods is, let me just first go ahead. Yeah, okay. So in the class person, in the methods, we first The first thing we do, what is the first thing that we do when we write anything in code?
We put two backslashes together as comments.
Yes, we always want to have a comment to say what we're going to do. So this method is going to convert kilograms to pounds. Well, actually, let's go about this. So one way we can write this method is converting any kilogram to a pound. Another way that we can write this is converting this person's weight from kilograms to pounds. And I would say that the second method makes more sense because this is a method inside the class person. So we shouldn't just like randomly give it a random kilogram, like, 3 kilograms of apples to see how many it is in pounds. So we shouldn't do this. Instead, we should be concerned about this person's weight. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to start writing a method. The first thing we do is we write what the input is and what the output is. What's the input here?
This person's weight.
This person's weight, exactly. But we already have that in the fields, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't need to really pass it in anything. This should already know. So we can just put nothing on the input. What should the output be?
It should be weight in pounds.
Right. And what is the type of that output?
It's going to be a double.
Exactly. It's going to be a number, and since it's going to be a decimal, it's going to be a double. So we know that it's going to be input of nothing to double. Perfect. Mm-hmm. Now it's super easy to write the code. The way we would do this is in Java, we first start with the output type. So we write double. So this tells Java, hey, I'm expecting a double at the end of this method. And then we'll give it a name. So we can just say convert weight to pound. And we're expecting nothing. So we can just do that. Oops. Let me make this a little bit clearer. We're not expecting any input, so it can be just an empty parentheses and then an open brace, and then Java will automatically create a closing brace. Now, in here, since we have told Java, hey, we're definitely expecting a double, it's expecting a return statement. So we have to say return. This tells Java, hey, whatever thing I tell you after, this is what I want this method to return. So it's a Java keyword. Mm-hmm. And, well, what is it going to return? It's going to return the person's weight multiplied by that number, right?
Right.
How do we write the person's weight? How do we access the person's weight?
We should refer it by this dot weight.
Precisely. Yes, it's going to be this specific person's weight, and then an asterisk is going to be a multiplier, and then 2.2046. 62, and a semicolon because this is Java and everything always ends with a semicolon. That's it. That's your method. Does this make sense?
Perfect. Yes, totally.
Excellent. So, we can do the same thing if we wanted to access this dot name or this dot height or age or anything like that. And you can make any other calculations you want if you wanted to like increase the age by 1, if you want to decrease it, whatever you want to do. This here is a method.
Right.
Perfect. One thing I'll just mention are the naming conventions. So remember how fields, we always start with a lowercase. So we have name, we have height, and so on. So fields are always with like lowercase typically. The constructor and the class name are always with uppercase. And in Java, naming conventions typically has what we call a camel case. And a camel case means you start with like a lowercase, and then every time it's a new word, you can't like add spaces. You're not allowed to like have a empty space in between words, but you will capitalize again. So it will be like small c, capital W, and then capital T and capital P again. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Perfect. So that's called camel case. And people have different naming conventions. Some people do like underscores or different things. But typically for Java, camel case is very much what's used. Sometimes in Python, you might do more like underscores instead.
Right.
Excellent. All right. So now that we have this method, let's say similar to the homework problem that we did last time, if we want to access this method outside of this class, so outside of class person, we want to create a new person, so person P, whatever, gets new person, and let's say their name is, let's say, Hossein. Their age is 35. Their weight is 80.5. And their height is 183. Okay, that's our person, right?
Okay, yes.
If I want to know this person's weight in pounds, what should I do?
You should use the method that is written, right?
Yes, exactly. So the way I would do this, I would say P dot, that's the equivalent of like the person, this person's dot, and then I can have access to its methods. So convert weight to pound. And it's not expecting any input, so I just pass it an empty parentheses. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense.
Excellent, yay. All right, there's another method that I'd like you actually to guide me through.
Okay.
Let's say we want to calculate a person's BMI. And if you're not familiar with BMIs, it's typically used to know, the health of this person, because you can't just use the weight, because the weight depends on the height. So the way you would calculate the BMI is you divide the person's weight by their height in meters. Squared.
Right.
Yeah, and this gives you a BMI. So, and
you have to work with methods.
yes, exactly. And one of the things that we need to do is we have to convert their current height, because their current height is in centimeters. So their centimeter height to their meter height, it just needs to be, I believe, divided by 100.
Yes.
to be height in meters. Okay. So, how would we write this method? What's the first thing that we do when we want to write a method?
You should start by a double because it's gonna be a decimal number, a BMI.
Yes, it is, but what did we say makes the difference between great programmers and good programmers?
The purpose statement.
The comments, yes, exactly. So before we do this, what should we do? What should we write?
So we want to get to have the BMI.
Mhm.
What should we write?
Yeah, so we want to determine BMI of this person. And so this is your purpose statement. Your input and output is called your signature.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going to be our input and what's going to be our output?
Our output is going to be a double, I think.
Yes, exactly, because that's going to be our BMI. It's going to be like, let's say 20.3. Our input is just going to be this person's height and weight, which is essentially nothing, right? It's just going to be this person.
Yes.
Excellent. You don't need to write this all the time because Java method already tells you this immediately. But in the beginning, it's good to just like think about it. So you're more systematically like going to program this. All right. So like you said, we're gonna start with a double because the return type is gonna be a double. Okay. What do I do after?
You have to give it a name. So it's going to be double BMI, for example.
Or calculate BMI, right? Because
Calculate BMI, yes.
excellent. Calculate BMI. Okay.
And then it's going to be parentheses.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's weight.
Ooh, you're getting a little bit ahead of yourself. So the first parentheses is about the input type. Since we're not getting any inputs, it can just be an empty parentheses, right?
All right, yes.
Yes. And then we start with an open brace. Okay. And so now tell me what you were going to say.
That's weight.
This dot weight. Okay, so the person's weight. Here. Yeah.
Divided by height in meters, but we have it in centimeters,
so we can do this dot height divided by 100. And since it's a double, we need to do 100.0. Like this.
I think so.
Okay.
But it has to be times in height again, because this is squared too.
Exactly. So we'll add another brace and we'll multiply it by itself again. This dot height divided by 100. Close that bracket here. Okay. Does this look alright to you?
I think so.
Anything missing?
I'm getting scared now.
Don't be scared. This is good. So one thing, we said when we tell Java that we expect an output, then Java expects a return statement. So we need to write return here.
Right.
So it knows what to return, because otherwise it just does this calculation and nothing else. Then we also need to make sure we have a semicolon at the end.
Mhm.
And we need to make sure that this brace ends here. So just like this.
Right.
Perfect. Okay. So this makes perfect sense, and it would work perfectly because it's the weight divided by the height squared. Now, this method would work, and if you give it a person, it will give you the right number. But here's another thing that makes a difference between good programmers and great programmers. Good programmers just care about, like, does it work? Does it give me the right number? And then that's it. Great programmers, they know that the code will need to be read by actual humans. And if they want to make a change to something, the easier it is to read the code, the better it will be. So if you look at this, it's like a little bit complicated, right? It's like the weight, and then there's a division, and there's like three different parentheses somewhere, and then you're dividing it by 100 for some reason, and you're
Right.
multiplying it. It's a whole thing. But what would make it so much more clean is if you just calculate this height in meters once, and then you don't need to like redo that calculation again. Okay? So here's how a great programmer will write this. So you first start with a purpose statement again. Determine BMI of this person. We'll talk about publics and privates later, but for now, just know that we start with a public. And then we'll start with the return type, double. And calculate BMI. Whoops, that's not a B. BMI, empty parentheses, and an open brace, and I always like to end my brace. Okay, so first I'm going to calculate the height in meters. So double height in meters gets this dot height divided, whoopsie, this dot height divided by 100. Okay. Then I can say return, so much cleaner. I can say return this dot weight divided by height, height in meters multiplied by height in meters. Oh, I have an extra brace here. Yeah, so this will end this, and then that's it. That's it. Look how much easier it is to understand this. You are only calculating this part once, which saves time, and it's not noticeable in a method as simple as this, but it's good to learn this so that later on you can save time like this. And it's so much easier to understand. You're like, oh, okay, you're just having your height in meters multiplied, and then you're dividing your weight by it. That's it. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Totally.
Perfect. All right, that's our class for today. To make sure you understand things, can I give you a homework?
Yes, of course, my favorite part again.
Excellent, excellent. So, for homework, remember the paper planes from last class?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So, after some unfortunate incidents with the paper planes and the number of people that it flew, engineers realized that the max number of people is not just sufficient. What we need is a maximum weight. So, given the maximum weight in kilograms, design a method that converts the weight to pounds uh, from the maximum weight field of the paper plane. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, convert it to pounds. The second problem, this is the first one. I'd like you to design a method called convert to string. Convert, remember the camel case?
Yes.
Convert to string, which will return a string describing the important fields of a paper plane. So we'll take a paper plane and it will essentially describe it in a string. And then you can also use this for your ideal paper plane that you created in the last homework. One hint I will give you is that the plus works for numbers and also for strings. So you could say something like hello plus world, and it will give you hello world.
Oh, now I see.
Yeah. Excellent. Any questions?
No, all clear.
Excellent. Have a great time.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.